Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's our final shiur before Pesach on HaMaspik. We're going to quickly finish chapter 5, Nedivut, generosity, and then make a start on chapter 6, which is Arichut Apayim, being calm. As I said, there are only 13 chapters in this book, but the chapters later on get longer. To summarize what we've seen so far, we gave an introduction to the book. We saw in chapter 1 there are two paths of serving HaShem. There's the regular path, which a person is called a tzaddik. And then there's the special path of the Hasid. And with the path of the Hasid, there are many nuances according to how unique and dedicated a person is. But there's no point trying to be a Hasid when you haven't done the basics of being a Tzaddik. That was chapter 1. In chapter 2, Rabbi Avraham taught us that all character traits really are interrelated. When you work upon one trait, it's going to help another. And when a person fails in one, it's also going to affect others. And we're going to see examples of this tonight. In chapter 3, we talked about purity of action, purity of motive, and we said there are four levels. Rabbi Avraham taught us of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The lowest is doing mitzvot and observing things merely because of social pressure. The second level is one who serves Hashem for others, but also for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The third level is where a person serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu solely, but out of fear or out of anticipation of reward. And the fourth level is serving Hashem simply because He has commanded us to do so. In chapter 4, which we completed last week, we saw that compassion is a very important midah. It's the first rahum, it's the first midah which describes HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the 13 attributes of mercy. But sometimes, as we saw, a person needs to not be compassionate, sometimes even cruel, sometimes to be akhzar, to treat others as strangers. But the important thing which we concluded with last week is that if a person has doubt as to whether to be compassionate, whether to be Rahman or to be Akhzar or to be foreign and cruel to someone, it's always better to veer towards compassion rather than cruelty. Similar idea which Rambam echoes in the Shmoneh Prakim in the 8 chapters. That's what we concluded with in chapter 4 last week. Then we began and we almost completed chapter 5. What have we seen in chapter 5 so far? Firstly, Rabbi Avraham in chapter 5, the chapter on Nedivut, he defined what generosity is. Generosity is when a person gives when there is no duty to do so. And generosity and kamtsanut are two sides, meaning generosity means nedivut, miseriness is kamtsanut, and that's vis-a-vis other people. And then there are two other Hebrew terms which Rabbi Avram understands to be vis-a-vis a person himself. There is bizbuz, a person is very he spends a lot, he's excessive in his spending, and a hisachon is when a person saves upon themselves. We're not talking about yourself. It may well be that within your own self you want to save or you want to be large. That makes no difference. What we're discussing is nedivut, which the opposite of nedivut is kamtsanut, which is vis-a-vis other people. Either a person is miserly with others or a person is generous with others. One should always be generous, Rabbi Avraham taught us, but to the appropriate people. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't generous to everyone, Rabbi Avraham said. Um, even to even to even to and HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't generous to everyone. One should be generous only to the appropriate people. And Rabbi Avraham taught us that generosity can be with money, clearly, but not just that, also intellect. Are you going to share your intellect with others? Faith and religion. Are you going to share your beliefs and your convictions and your practices and traditions with others? And fourthly, influence, your power, your capacity to be able to affect. These are all influences and spheres in which a person is able to actually have influence and to be generous and to share the generosity with other people. And we saw he gave us examples from Avraham Avinu with each of these four things. Avraham was generous in money, in power and influence when it came to the kings, in his faith, he shared it with others, in his intellect, he taught other people the Yichud Hashem, the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where we left off last. That's where we left off last week. And now we continue just the final page of this. Should I share screen gone? The final page of this chapter before we begin the next chapter. So concludes the Avraham, Avraham Avinu, from Abraham's generosity, which we discussed last week in money, influence, religion, faith, and intellect. למדים אנחנו על גדולת טבעו הנדיב. We can see Abraham's generous nature. נוסף על הראיה ממנו למידת הסתפקותו במועט ואמונתו ביטחונו באלוהים וזלזולו בקניין המזל. Aside from generosity, a byproduct of generosity is that it trains a person to be satisfied with what a person needs and not to put too much importance and emphasis on transient things. שהרי זכה לצבור רכוש גדול. Abraham was very wealthy. Torah tells us, Abraham kaved me'od b'mikneh b'kesef u'b'zahav. He had silver, gold, cattle. He was very rich, Abraham. V'harif shidat menu. But he wasn't interested in taking more and more. K'mo she'amar, like he said, when he won the war, v'yomer Avraham melech Sodom, and he released Sodom, the king of Sodom, from captivity. Harimot yadi l'Adonai le'lon koneh shem ba'aretz, michotu atzaroch na'ar, v'mekach mikol ha'shelach v'lo tomar ani yesharti et Avraham. I don't want anything. I don't need your money. Right? So aside from the generosity which we've discussed in the previous week, we also see how this trains a person to be satisfied and not to be greedy and constantly wanting more and more. Try to work on this, try to go in the path of Abraham as much as we're able to do so. Furthermore, says Abraham, this character trait of generosity and being large מלמדת על האמונה בביטחון ומיעוט השמחה בקנה העולם הזה והביטחון בתוצאות הדעת ועבודת השם. This trains, aside from generosity, it also trains a person to have better trust in God and to reduce emphasis on transient matters. כי הנדיבות בממון וברכוש מלמדת על ביטחונו He's going to go through each of the four things now. Firstly, generosity with money. It shows that you trust in Hashem. The fact I'm giving away my ma'aser, I'm giving away my tzedakah, 10% or 20%, whatever person gives, you trust. The fact you're willing to do that and you're generous with that shows that you trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu will look after a person's need. And it also and it also reminds us to not to focus too much on transient matters. And it teaches our identity and our soul to focus on things which are permanent and not things which are transient. And a person who becomes habitual in being miserly with money with other people, the knock-on effect with that will be that it causes a lack of trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and a focus on transient matters rather than permanent things. That's with money. What about generosity? When it comes to generosity and influence, this teaches us, this affects and trains a person to be to work upon their to trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that God will maintain their ability to influence, their ability to have this power. And it won't be reduced. And it won't be decreased because I'm helping someone else. If you're miserly with that, that is the opposite. I think I said last week, did I say last week, Rabbi Sachs, the difference between influence and power? Right? I think I said that power is a zero-sum game, influence is the opposite of that. The more you influence other people, then the more influence you have. So a person who's generous with their influence recognizes that the more I influence people, it's not going to limit my own influence. It's not going to make me less powerful by the fact I'm sharing with other people, right? But if you're miserly with that and you don't like to share a contact which you have or some, then that shows a lack in trust of Hashem, and that it's not everything's in the hands of Hashem. And what about intellect? When you're generous with your wisdom, it shows you that you appreciate how important intellect is. ושלא יחסיר ממנה בגלל לימודה, אלא אדרבה יוסיף עליה. I'm not going to lose out by teaching other people. כמו שנאמר, הרבה חוכמה למדתי מחבריי, יותר מרבותיי, מתלמידיי, יותר מכולם. I learned a lot from my colleagues, I learned a lot from my teachers, but the most I learned from my students, right? Which is why I thank you all for being able to learn this together, because what we teach is always what, stays with us the most. And a person who teaches and shares with others, then that shows the trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the more you give to others, the more intellect a person shares, the more intellect they end up having. Umarad ma mu'ata nezek shallah chokhmah linazek. Right? And it shows that you recognize that your wisdom won't diminish and it won't be damaged by sharing it with others. והחוכמה נכונה ומצוינת, and true wisdom, היא שתמליץ את בעלי למדל האחרים. True wisdom which a person has is when he's able and willing and capable to share it to other people. The Brisker Rav used to say, and he told us it in yeshiva over and over again, if you can't explain it, if you can't tell it over to your havruta, if you can't tell it over to someone else, you don't understand it. Right? True chokhmah is chokhmah which you're able to teach and to express and to share with other people. Mar Hacham Shlomo Melech said in Mishlei, "Chochmot bachutz taronna barachavot ten kolah." True wisdom should be able to sing outside, should be able to be publicly proclaimed. Berosh homiyot tikra. It should be called out on the top of streets. Bepitchei sharim ba'ir hamareat omer. It should be said at the entrance of gates. Ad matai petayim te'avu peti. Right, stop. Talk wisdom. V'amar od halo chokhmat tikra u'tvuna titen kola berosh meromim. Wisdom should give its voice publicly. Alechem ishim ikra ve'kol yel bnei adam havinu petayim orma uchsiim havinu lev. Pay attention to the foolish. Let wisdom be proclaimed publicly. If you're miserly with being able to teach and to share intellect and wisdom with other people, then it shows that you don't trust and you don't recognize the importance of wisdom being able to be shared with others, and that has a knock-on effect. And finally, with faith, vanidivut badat, being generous with faith, teaching other people mitzvot, sharing your Shabbat table with them, sharing them the mitzvot, teaching them to do mitzvot, is to be generous, to teach people our faith, our tradition. And it shows your desire and your love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and of our religion. Because if you really love something, you want to share it with other people. If you truly believe in something, you want to share it with other people. Amar David in Tehillim, Lechu banim shim'u liyirat elametchem. Come, I want to teach you the fear of Hashem. I want to teach you about our Torah. I want to teach you about our faith. I want to teach you about our religion. If you don't want to share the people, you say, I'm going to sit in my corner, I'm going to study myself, I'm going to become uber religious, and I'm not going to share or spend time with people who are less religious than me. That shows that a lack in being able to share with other people and being able to be generous with your faith, but also that you don't have that excitement about it. When you're excited about something, you want to share it with other people. Try and be dedicated to work on this midah, which isn't easy. Love charity and justice, and the kindness of Hashem will fill the earth. So that brings us to the end of chapter 5. To summarize what we've learned in this chapter, and before there's any questions, generosity is vis-a-vis other people. Opposite of this, kamtsanut, no duty to give to others. Always be generous, but to the appropriate people. And generosity can be with money, influence, intellect, and faith. Avraham had all of these. And when you work on generosity in each of these 4 categories, it has a knock-on effect. When we work on generosity and money, it shows trust in Hashem. When that He'll give us what we need. When we are generous in our influence, it shows trust in Hashem that we won't lose our influence and ability and power. When we share our intellect and we're generous to our intellect, it shows that we believe in Hashem, that we're not going to lose our wisdom by sharing it, and on the contrary, we'll actually increase it. And finally, when we share and we're generous with our faith and our beliefs, it shows that we love our belief, we love our faith. And the opposite with all of these 4 things will have, aside from causing a person to be miserly, which is a bad trait as we've seen, but it will also have a knock-on effect in their bitachon, in their trust, in their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, and like Rambam writes in Hilchot Tzedakah, Rambam writes, right, in chapter 10, LeOlam en adam ma'ani min tzedakah. You'll never lose out from charity in the general sense. With generosity and charity, you never lose out. Right? So that's the idea. Which we're learning in this chapter, the importance of generosity and in all aspects. And so that's the essence of this chapter. So we've seen now in this book so far 2 midot, the midah of rahamanut, compassion, and the midah of nedivut, of generosity. And now we're going to turn to chapter 6, which is arichut apayim, which we're going to translate as slow to anger or calmness. Any comments, any questions on anything in these chapters before we begin chapter 6? Okay, so let's make a start. It's a relatively long chapter. It'll take us 2 classes, so we'll make a start now and complete it. Bezrat
Oh,
Hashem.
I was gonna ask something. Sorry.
Afterwards. Yes,
This is around. I put the camera instead of the of the microphone.
go ahead.
Uh, is this from the Rambam?
This is from the son of the Rambam, Rabbi Avraham ben Harambam,
Rabbi
son
Abba.
and very influential character, like his father. I can send you my first shiur I gave on this afterwards, in which I went through the whole biography of him and his works. But this is the son
Oh,
of the Rambam, but much of his thought comes from his father, and we've already seen in the past 5 chapters, he's quoted his father at least 3 times already. Okay, so it's heavily influenced. So we're learning his son, but in essence, we're also at the same time gaining insight in Harambam's philosophy as well. Okay,
okay, very good.
thank you. Perek Vav, chapter 6, Arichut Apayim, slow to anger. אריכות אפיים היא ביטוי להיעדר החימה והכעס כמעט כליל. These 2 words, arichot apayim, is an expression for the lack of anger, almost complete lack of anger. And he says almost complete for reasons which we will see. So that's what arichot apayim means. It means almost a complete negation of anger. It's one of the very important character traits, and it's one of the attributes, 13 attributes, which Hashem is described as it were. As it says, right? This important character trait, either a person already has a tendency towards it, ורגיעת הנפש המתעוררת והתחזקות כוח השופט, and a serenity of a person's character, וכך תקל התקשרות אליה, and therefore training towards calmness is easier. That's one possibility. או שיש בטבעו של אדם, or it could be that within your nature, קושי כנגד הנטייה הזאת. It's difficult for you to have this tendency. מהיותו חמוס מזג, because you have a character of hot-temperedness, ויצריו שוחרי מדון, ואז אין דבר השם עוד כנגד תנייתו. Then it's going to be very difficult to go against your tendency of anger, זולת התקשרות נמרצת בדרך ארץ חוקות התורה, unless you put in a lot of training and effort in working upon this. So Rabbi Avraham is saying here something important, which actually Harambam himself says in the 8 chapters. He doesn't say it here, but he doesn't quote his father, but Harambam says it explicitly when he talks in the context of free will. Of course, humans are born differently. And of course, some humans are more prone to anger than others. We all know it. Just look around. We'll see some people get angry very easily and some people get angry less easily. 100%. Within our character, there are some of us who have more of a, and in those days, in their science and their medicine, they believed it was dependent on the 4 humors, right? On the blood and the thing. Okay, I don't fully understand it, and don't think it's correct today, but they believe there's some kind of balance or imbalance in the body, whether a person is more prone to these things or less prone to these things. And Rabbi Avraham is saying, look, you may be that you're less prone to it, but maybe they are more prone to it. Either case, you need training. Of course, if you're more prone to it, you're going to need a greater training. But that's life. Life isn't always fair, and that's fine. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us different qualities. Some have more of a tendency towards anger, some less. Either case, we're going to have to train through the Torah. But he's recognizing from the start that some will find it harder than others, which is why we've said this many times in the past, which is why the Mishnah says, Al tadin et havercha shtegel imkomo. You can never judge a person's character. Because a person who gets angry once and a person who gets angry 5 times, right? It may be that the person who gets angry once is worse than the person who gets angry 5 times. The person who gets angry 5 times stopped himself becoming angry another 45 times because they find it much more difficult. The person who got angry once, he finds it very easy. And why did you get angry even that one time? This is why. We can't know how a person's Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the true judge of character, what that person's temperament is. But in either case, whether you've got an easy temperament to anger or a harder temperament to anger, training is critical. And that's what this chapter is for. This is what King Solomon said in Mishlei, Tov erech hapayim megibor u'moshel beruchom miloched ir. Greater is the person who's slow to anger than a warrior, and greater is the person who controls their emotions than a person who conquers a city. Heve omer, mi sheyesh lo cholet lishlot al ka'aso v'lichbosh tisro, if you're in control of your emotions. ועליך לדעת, and you need to understand, כי אריכות אפיים המשובחת היא שליטת כוח השכל על כוח היצר. The essence of being slow to anger and being calm is when your intellect is in control over your emotion. וריבונותו עליו והפעלתו, על פי שמחייבים הדרכת הדעת ושיפוט השקעות התורה. Correctly. ולא מתוך קרירות מזג בעלמא או רפיון היצרים או מורך הלב. He's saying two things here. Firstly, he's saying that this midah is fully worked upon by the most important thing, the head title of this all, is when intellect trumps over emotion. Right? I've said in the past, from Moshe Shapira, Melech is Moach, Lev, Kaved. Moach, Melech, brain, Lev, emotion, Kaved, action. Right? Not the other way around. Right? A person who's a king, who's in control, is a person whose intellect is over their, who runs over their emotion, not vice versa. Many of us, our emotions trump our intellect, and so we make mistakes. And then this is why the Gemara says, a person who gets angry, im hachamhu chokhmato mistaleket mimenu. Now, some understand that Gemara to mean that some kind of curse. Because you get angry, Hashem's cursing you that you're going to lose your wisdom. No. What the Gemara means very simply is that even if you're the greatest hacham, when you get angry, you're no longer a hacham. You've lost all your intellect because your intellect's no longer in there. Your emotion is in complete control now. It's not a kind of punishment that chokhmato mistaleket mimenu. It's a reality. It's a consequence. When a person gets angry, then they lose their intellect, and they are. That's the point one is saying. So the most important thing is always to put the intellect. This is why they say nowadays, count to 10, all different methods people have of anger management, right? People go to therapy for these kinds of things. Yeah, this is already in the times of Rabbi Avraham telling us how important this is. But the other thing he's saying here, and this is important, he's saying, I'm not telling you to be apathetic. I'm not telling you to be a coward, right? You need to learn when to be. There are times where you need to show anger and you need to be strong and forceful. And he's going to talk about that, right? He's saying two things. Saying first, the intellect needs to trump the emotion, and secondly, but do it in the right way and not just apathetic. Everyone runs over you and you're just weak. And submissive. You shouldn't be submissive either.
Okay.
Yes, Mark.
Does he talk about when you lose your temper, it's like worshipping a Buddha Zara?
That's what exactly. So that's what the Gemara says, and he's going to quote it.
Okay.
He's going to quote it, and that's the same. Yeah, let's leave it till we get there. Precisely. Yeah. So what we've seen so far is that anger is one of the traits of anger is a bad trait, and calmness is one of the traits of Kadosh Baruch Hu, 13 attributes of mercy. Some have more of a tendency to it, some less, but the most important is to have the intellect trump over the emotion and not to get angry, but also not to be apathetic. ועוד עליך לדעת כי הכעס המסית לנקמה אצל רוב בני אדם ומותיר משטמה בנפש פנימה. Anger also causes revenge and leaves an imprint within a person. Yeah, I've read this. I'm sure you've all read this as well. I don't know the study offhand now, but cancer is people who live with anger, people who fight. I can't remember the exact study, but the study's shown that people who live with anger and revenge, generally they were more for into relation to cancer and vice versa. Okay, the point is it's leaving something within you, some enmity within a person. If you're an angry person and you're also a powerful person, then you're actually going to be revengeful. וכדרך שמתנקים המלכים מדומם לאט בשעת כעסם, like kings or powerful people, as soon as they're angry, do something, they'll straight away take vengeance against you. אחים מהכעס תשוש ונסתר בצוף אלעזרת ליד לקחת נקם מרע, if you're not able to take it quickly, אז יותיר משטמה מפעפעת בנפש פנימה, then it leaves a simmering effect in the heart. ולפיכך הסמיכה תורה איסור נטירה לאיסור נקימה שנאמר לא תיקום ולא תיטור. This is why when the Torah talks about it in Vayikra and Kedoshim, it juxtaposes. Don't take revenge, that's the action. But also don't harbor, this is the word, harbor. You harbor an enmity, right? And it's bubbling, it's sizzling, it's simmering within a person, right? Sometimes if you've got the power, you'll take it, you'll take revenge. That's lo tikom, that's nekama. Sometimes you don't have the ability, or you're going to wait a bit. That's simmering, that's bubbling, that's netira, that's harboring, and that's bad. Both are bad. Aval, mi shema'anish kefi chovato. But when a person punishes as is necessary, lo mitoch ritha, not from anger, velo mitoch hitragshut, and not from emotion, hareu mi madrigat hasidut gedola kova lenevoah. That is an extremely high level of piety, close to prophecy. We only call this revenge in a borrowed sense. Right? Like HaShem says, I'll take vengeance against my enemies. It's in a borrowed sense, not revenge. It means consequences. This is important. Consequence is important. Right? Okay? Consequences are important. But not from anger. Not from anger. This is what Rambam writes. This is what Rambam writes in Chod Deot. We learned this one together a few years ago. If a person wants to educate his children and his people in his house, or on the community, so they become better, you should show yourself as being angry. But you are fully in control. Your intellect is, this is the point that Rabbi Avraham is teaching us. The intellect is still in control. It's like you're pretending to be angry, but you're not angry. But you need to show a stern face and show yourself. Right? Anger brings a person to great sins. Because when you're angry, your heart takes control and you lose your intellect, like a drunkard. This is why the HaChamim said, don't get angry and don't sin, and don't get drunk and don't sin. They compared anger to drunkenness. Sometimes you can see an angry person, he's like, he or she is drunk. What's the point of drunk? The point is, just like a drunk person has no more intellect, you can't rationalize, you can't reason with them. So too, if you're angry, you've lost your intellect, you can no longer reason or rationalize. וכבר הרבינו לדרוש בחלקים הקודמים בגנות הכעס מביא דברים בבנות הרבה, וכאן נחזור מצד הדברים למען לצפות במאמר ותדעו. So I've already discussed this a bit in the previous, we don't have that, but I'm going to go over some of the important points, okay? So, you see again over and over, he's stressing this point that there's a conflict between intellect and emotion. And anger comes when you've lost your intellect, which causes drunkenness and so on. Just like drunkenness and so on, yeah? Having said this, נאמר, כי הכעס המגונה אין פירושו שאדם כועס בלא עילה מעוררת רוגז. וממילא יהיה פירוש אריכות אפיים שלא יכעס אדם אלא משום עילה המעוררת רוגז. Don't think that anger is getting angry for no reason, and being calm is only getting angry when there's no reason. Because only stupid people get angry when there's no reason. Anger which I'm telling you is bad, it's even when it's reasonable for you to be angry. And calmness is even when you have a right to be angry. The famous story in Gemara in Shabbat where two people made a bet. Can you get Hillel angry or not? Right? And one of them said, I'm putting money down, I'll get him angry. And he went to him on Erev Shabbat while Hillel is in the bathhouse trying to get ready for Shabbat. And there he starts asking him ridiculous questions. Why are the heads of the Bavliim, why are the heads of Babylonians round, and why is this person square? All these kinds of ridiculous questions he asks them. And he lost the bet. Right? And you have a right to be angry in such a case. This person is ridiculous things he's asking you on Erev Shabbat, an hour before Shabbat. Right? And even in such and still you're calm. That's what the Gemara. That's what we mean when we talk about being calm. It means even when you have a right and you have it's reasonable. Not when you have a right, when it's reasonable to get angry, and still you don't. That's called. No, we're not talking about not getting angry for stupid things. We're talking about not getting angry when you know, if someone's really done something very bad to you. ועניין זה יש לו תחום נרחב מאוד והבדלי דרגה רבים. Of course, there are multiple variables of the scale here. לפי הדברים השונים אמורים כך שמחמת גודל הזקם אי אפשר לעמוד נגדם אלא סתם שבסבלין. There are some things which some people can do something so bad and makes so many people angry that only extremely patient people, 1% of people can withstand it. ויש דברים מעוררי כעס שמחמת מותר כמה הזקם לא יחסר לזקן שבגזלים. And there are some things which are very small which 99% of people won't get angry about, but you got the 1% of people who always get angry, who'll get angry even about the most tiny things. וכשאדם בעל מזג ממוצע, a reasonable person of temperament, אינו רוגז על קלות ואינו עומד בחמורות. הרי הוא נקרא ממוצע מזג. A normal person, you're not perfected, you still got lots of work to do, is when you get angry about big things and you don't get angry about small things. Again, most of us would fall into that category. We get angry when the serious things are done to us, and when small things we remember what we learn when there's small things. לא יתקנא בתואר קסם, then you're not called an angry person, ויגונה עליו, ולא יתקנא בתואר סבלן. ההולך בדרך הליכות אפיים מתקשה לה. But we're also not yet on the path of becoming patient people and calm people. Right? We're in the middle. ומי שקרוב לצד הכעס ודברים הקלים, הרוקם והגנאי. If a person more often than not gets angry, then he's closer to the anger person. ומי שקרוב לצד העמידה בדברים החמורים, הרי קרוב להיות מתואר כהולך בדרך הנ"ל הזאת. A person who less times than not, he doesn't get angry, so he's closer to being a patient person. ויש לעניין הזה תחום נרחב ודרגות ביניים. There are many and multiple variations and levels in between. The point he's saying here is, before he gets to, let's summarize what we've learned so far, before he gets to how to achieve this. It's all very well talking about it, how bad anger is, but, we have to work on it. But what he's telling us so far is it's important to be calm. It's a character trait of HaShem. It doesn't mean apathy. It means being calm and in control of one's emotions with the intellect reigns over it. It's okay to show displeasure in a calm fashion as long as your intellect is still fully cognitive and still in control. When you don't express anger but harbor it, that's also bad. It simmers within the heart, and that's also bad. Getting angry is like getting drunk. You use your intellect. And of course, there are many levels of anger. Normal people will get angry at big things and not angry at small things. But to acquire this trait, one needs to not get angry even at small things. And of course, human beings will be on a scale of people who get angry at everything and people who get angry at nothing. So, we need to work out where we are in the scale and then try to work up the scale towards getting angry at nothing. And that's what he's going to try to show us this evening. He's going to begin to try to show us this evening. He's going to try to show us this. Okay, so how do we work on this? במידה הזאת, אריכות אפיים, נשגבה היא וקשה להשיגה. It's hard. As we all know, there are all times when we feel infuriated, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's with friends. And you reasonably feel the right to show anger and to show displeasure. ומחייבת שקידה גדולה זילות של לסתום ממנה. And you need a lot of devotion to work on this. וזו תושג כדי התקשו מסייח חוקת התורה. There's two ways we can work on this. Habit and Torah. Okay? Torah is part 2. We'll come to that. Maybe tonight. We've got another half an hour, so maybe tonight we'll get to that. But firstly, habit. Let's start with two major things. First, habit and Torah. Let's start with habit. בהתקשרות במוסרים, with habit, training with habit, שהרגיל האדם את נפשו ללכות הפעמים דברים מרגיזים. A person needs to try to train themselves to be calm. ומדוחפו יצרה הכעס, יבלמו מוסרות השכל. When you're pushed towards anger, try to let the intellect reign. ולא ימהיר חמה, כמו שציווה שלמה, אל תבהל ברוחך לכעוס. Try not to get angry quickly, slow down. ולהרגיל לעצמו למשמעת הליגח, שיחשוב ויתבונן, כי הכעס מעלים את השכל. Remember, ובהיעדר השכל יהיה אדם כאריה חמר דומם מנחת וטרפות. When you become angry, you lose your intellect, like the Gemara I quoted earlier on. and you become like an animal. והכעס בא מן הסכלות, and anger comes from foolishness. ומודיע עליך שם שזרנות, מודיע על החוכמה, כבוד השכל. And it shows by this, you see this, people are angry, you look at them, you think, what's wrong with you? Like you're crazy. Just like calm people shows they're wise and clever. כדברי שלמה, ערך אפיים רב תבונה, קצר רוח מרים איוולת. You're slow to anger shows you're full of intellect. The opposite, it shows you're foolish. ואמר עוד, and he said further, שכל אדם האריך אפו ותפארתו עבור הפשע. Al Pasha, right? A person who's a person of intellect will be slow to anger. But how do I do this? ומתקשר באורח זה יזכור את התפרצויות רוגזו בימי חייו. Remember the times where you did get angry. ואת אשר גרם לו לזולתו מחמת רתחה. And what the consequences of that were. Right? We can all think of a time when we got angry. And the knock-on effect, sometimes very long knock-on effect, which it had. And also the sins which a person has as a result of this anger, and pelitot hapeh, and it literally means things which have left the mouth, which can't be returned. Which you got angry about. Yeah, say things which can never be returned. Like the Hachamim say, in the pasuk in Tehillim, what's the pasuk, right? Right? Like the arrows. Okay, there's a pasuk in the Shira Ma'arot, right? It says just like our mouth is just like the arrows, once they've left you, you can't take it back. Once the missile has left, there's no taking it back. So too, the words, once they've left. And think, so when you're about to get angry, think about the last time. Think about another time we did, and the knock-on effects and the broken relationships. Some relationships can never be fixed. Yeah, some marriages can never be fixed from certain comments made. ויזכור כי הכעס מביא לידי התגברות הרע ורכישת שנאה. It causes hatred to proliferate. חיפתירון לנפשו למלא את חפצה על ידי מתן רשות המשחית לעורר את קשתה. עתיד שכרו לצאת בהפסד הייסורים שיבוא על מעשורים עמהם. Whatever gain you're going to get from getting angry, and I feel, I'm going to teach this person a lesson. In the end, you're going to lose. Whatever gain you think you're going to have in the short term, in the long term, that gain will be lost. All right? ואמר שלמה, איש חמה יגרה מדון, וערך אפיים ישחית ריב. Angry people are always fighting, and slow, calm people don't fight. He doesn't say this, but this is the idea that, why do we get angry? Because we want to show people that you can't do this, and I'm going to teach you a lesson. Now, you think about it, that's often the root of why people get angry. I need to show you that you can't do this, and I'm going to teach you a lesson, you're never going to do this again. The reality is, and the older I get, the more I realize this, you can't change anyone in life. Yeah, not even one's children. The only person which we can change are ourselves. And that's essentially what we're learning this evening.
And that's also impossible.
It's impossible to change other people. Correct. It's
No,
impossible.
to change ourselves is very hard.
No, of course not.
Very hard. Yeah.
It's very hard. Of course, it's very hard. I agree, it's very hard. That's why we're talking about this together and discussing this together to work on it together. It's impossible to change other people. We can influence, we can perhaps, but generally speaking, it starts within a person himself. The main way is in a person himself, because it's far easier for a person to change how they react to other people than changing and trying to teach other people a lesson not to do things to you again. Okay. ועליך לדעת, and you need to know, כי דרך הסבלנות, הדרך הענווה, שותפות הן כשם שפיהם, הכעסות וגאווה שותפות הן. Very interestingly, he says that actually patience and calmness and humility go hand in hand, and anger and arrogance go hand in hand. כי על פי רוב, מה שמעורר את כוח הריב על הכעס גלוי, כי גאווה פנימית ומה שעובר לידי הסבלנות והאהבה הפנימית. Is often what causes anger is the arrogance. Again, I'm going to show you a lesson. You can't do this to me. You've belittled me. I'm going to teach you can't do this. Often anger comes from arrogance, and patience comes from humility. The Gemara says, be humble like Hillel, and don't be kapdan, not angry, but very strict. Don't be strict like Shammai. Right? What's the connection? asks Rabbi Avraham. What's the connection between being strict and being humble? What's humility got to do strict? According to what we explained, it makes sense. Right? If you're humble, like Hillel, you also won't be so strict and not so quick to anger. If you're quick to anger, you're also going to be arrogant, you won't be humble. לפיכך משותפות גם שתי התקשרויות המוסריות ודתית, לשתי הדרכים הללו. Therefore, when we they're connected, the training for humility affects the training of calmness affects the training of humility. ואין לנו ברירה לדבר על התקשרות לידי התורה לדרך הזה פסחה, אף שבצאתה היא גם של דרך ענווה. Therefore, we're going to talk about training for these two, anger and calmness, and it's at the same time we're going to talk about training for humility because they go hand in hand. So far, he's told us the first way of training towards being slow to anger: think, use intellect. Don't let intellect leave a person. And remember the times a person got angry and how the effect of that was in the long run and long term, the effect of that was. So remember that, and that's how can train a person a habit, right? Remember, like the Gemara says, you do a sin once, twice, three times, it becomes almost impossible to stop it. It becomes like it's permissible to you, right? The more one of the Hasidic masters said that 40 days, you do train in something 40 days, that you really acquire that character within you. He said that at a certain age, but fine. But it applies generally. Of course, the older a person gets, the harder it is because the more rooted in the habits are. But every one of us, take something on, whichever thing which is we're learning, and we got the Omer beginning in a week's time, right? This is the time to start thinking about these things. At least think, even if we don't. At least the next time, if next time we're about to get angry, we stop for a second and think about what we're learning now. That'll be worth it, right? That's what we're trying to remember this. That if we just think of it, that already shows that we're on the path. Okay, now the second way he said to train towards calmness is through the Torah, but there's two kinds. ונאמר, כי שניים הם סוגי התקשרות על ידי התורה לאריכות אפיים. There are two trainings from the Torah to calmness. האחד הוא לזכור מה שנאמר בתורה וספרי הנביאים בגנות הכעס ושבח חסרות הנעלה, וכן מאמרי חז"ל וסיפורים הדברים בעניין זה. והשני הוא להתבונן במצוות שתכליתן היא הכשרת הלבבות לסבלנות ומניעת הכעס בנפש ומחיקת רשמיו וגורמיו. Two ways to train from the Torah against anger. One is simply to go through the stories in the Torah and the Nevi'im, to see the stories of anger and to see the stories of calmness, and he's going to do both. This is still, again, he said there's two ways. There's habit, what we learned about before, intellect, let intellect reign, and then there's Torah. Within Torah, you've got two. You've got firstly going through the stories in the Torah and the prophets, and that means both the stories where people got angry and people were calm. And secondly, going through the mitzvot of the Torah, and it's interesting when I saw this, you forget how many mitzvot are actually linked to this. There are so many mitzvot which you wouldn't think are linked to this, but he's going to go through all the mitzvot which are linked to working upon calmness. These are two parts which we have in the Torah. And one path is just the narrative, the other path is the legislative. So now tonight we're going to focus. We're not going to get tonight in time to get to the legislative mitzvot, which we're going to have examples now. He's going to begin with examples, negative examples, and then positive examples. I think hopefully we'll get through all the examples in the remaining quarter of an hour, which we have. And then next time we'll see training through thinking about the legislative mitzvot, and then he'll talk about when anger is not good, when a calmness is not good, and so on. Okay, fine. Okay, within the section of Torah training, the first one is the stories in the Torah. צריך להתבונן בתחילה אל עוונו של קין בהריגת הבל. Think about just one thing quickly before we go on. just remember when he told us that there are different levels of people who are angry and people who are angry. Mesilat Sharim very nicely, Rabbi Lutzato, Mesilat Sharim, the Ramchal, he goes through the different levels. He says there's the highest level, which a person gets so angry and he's like he's serving Avodah Zarah. Uh, and that's, like a person, like you look at him like he's got nothing left. Right? And such a person is like an animal. He would destroy the world if he could. Okay, he goes through. It's nice to see. If you want to see afterwards, towards the end of chapter 11, he goes through the different levels. Like, I'm not going to go through it now. He goes to the different levels of anger and different kinds of people that there are. Some quick angry quicker than others, but this is just showing the point of Rabbi Avraham, what we said earlier, that there are levels of anger. Okay. So, firstly, stories in the Torah. Cain, Barigat Hevel, Shneimar, when Cain got angry and he killed his brother Hevel, Gadol avoni mineso. He said, my sin is great. V'ne'nashvu v'zaro. And he and his children were punished. V'sibata ma'asaya akas, ki yerotzeach v'chol mintakeh mitorah nikam al-yedei kas, k'nes kalel. It was all because of anger. He got angry. He wants to take revenge. And he kills his brother. And he gets punished. He had to exile. And even his children got punished. How do we know his children got punished? Because we see later on in Bereshit that he was killed, and his son Tuval Cain was also killed. Because Lemech, his descendant, was blind. And Tuval Cain was with him. And Cain saw an animal was hunting, uh, and he told and he told his father to kill it, and he ended up killing his son, and then he clapped his hands together and he killed his son. Okay, so the point is and this was as a result of the sins. He was punished and his descendants were punished. Why? Because of the anger he had. וכן צנעת עשיו ליעקב, שעוררתה הוא להחליט בליבו להמשיך כדם יעקב. עשיו wanted to spill the blood of יעקב, והתורה העידה מזימתו. So it says clearly, יקרבו ימי אבל אבי, והרגה את יעקב אחי. When my father dies, I'll kill my brother. וגם סיבת הדבר הזה הייתה חמה הכעס. This was all because of the anger. ורבקה אמרה ליעקב עד אשר תשוב חמת אחיך, עד שוב החפך ממך, ושכח את אשר עשית לך. Right? Rivka said, when your brother cools down, then we can think about what to do. ואונקלוס אמר בתרגומו, כי אמר הכפרה פניו במנחה, הרי אמר אנחינeh לרוגזeh. Right? When beginning of Vayishlach, when Yaakov is sending presents to Esav, he says, I will achapera fanav, I will atone his face. Targum translates, I'll atone his face, I will calm him down. This is still all those years on, he's still concerned of Yaakov's anger, of Esav's anger. So you see, anger, the effect it has, the brotherly hatred and so on. וכן שנאת השבטים אחי יוסף על כולם השלום אל יוסף. May peace be upon the tribes, the brothers of Yosef, but they had hatred to Yosef. לא הייתה סיבת החלטתם להורגו אלא כעסם וחמתם עליו. The main reason why they wanted to kill him was because of their anger. אמר אונקלוס בתרגומו, וימררוהו ורבו, ויתמררו יתה ונקמוהי. Right? They were bitter to him and they wanted to take revenge. They were angry, they were jealous. ואין ספק שהתחרטו בראותם את צרת יעקב באובדן בנו. No doubt, he's going to prove for this, but he says, no doubt, logically, that when they saw how upset their father Yaakov was, that they regretted it. Haratam lo ho'ila klum. Their regret didn't help, because what's done is done. וסופם שבא עליהם צרה, שאמרו בה, וגם דמו נדרש. And they were punished, and they had to end up going down to Egypt and the whole story with the spies and everything. So you see, and you know what Yaakov said about his firstborn Reuven. He's got very strong anger, Reuven. So you see with Cain and Hevel, you see with Yaakov and Esav, and you see the brothers with Yosef. ודייך אם נאמר כי הטעות שנענש עליה משה לא הייתה לכעס שגרם לו לומר שמונה מורים, והבא מרי ז"ל אמר כי עיקר העונש בעל הכעס כפי מבואר בביאור למסכת אבות ואנו לא נערך בזאת. Okay, there is a whole book, I remember there's a book called Sha'arei Aharon, very nice commentary on the Torah. He brings there at least 23, perhaps 26, but more than 20 explanations about what the sin of Moshe was at Mei Meriva. Moshe did something, he hit the rock, he did something wrong, and there are so many different opinions what exactly he did wrong. Says the Avram going in the path of his father, that the sin, it would be enough, everything I'm telling you would be enough to show you about Moshe. That the Rambam understood, and Avram's following in this light, the sin of Moshe at the water when he struck the rock wasn't the problem that he struck the rock. The problem was that he got angry when he referenced and he called the Bnei Israel Morim. He said, "You are rebellious ones." Right? And that was the main punishment. The fact he lost control of his emotions, if we can say that about Moshe, on his level, as it were, because we can't talk about, how, as it were, Moshe's level, he lost control of his emotions. But that's the approach of Rambam and Rabbi Avraham takes. The sin of the waters wasn't the actual striking, but more was when he said, he lost, he said, "You listen, you rebellious ones." He spoke down to Bnei Israel and got angry. So this is enough to show you how bad anger is, and because of that, Moshe Rabbeinu could not enter Eretz Israel. Okay, good. V'Shaul. Now that's stories from the Torah. Now we turn to stories in the prophets. ושאול בחיר השם לא בא לידי הריגת כהני השם חרבת נוב עיר הכהנים לידי חמתו וכעסו. Shaul thought that the prophets in Nov were supporting his enemies, and he destroyed them out of his anger. דוד משיח השם לא ביקש להורגת נבל אלא בשל כעסו עליו. ולא ידעת את הודעתו לאביגל כשמנעת הוא מן העוון הזה באומרה אליו, ולא תהיה זאת לך לפוקה ולמכשול וישיבה לאמור, וברוך טעמך וברוכה את אשר כליתיני היום הזה מבוא בדמים. David had asked Naval for something, and Naval insulted him back. And when David heard this insult, he wanted to kill Naval. He was very angry with him. And Abigail stopped him. She said, "This is going to be bad for you." And he responded and he said, David to Abigail, "Blessed are you. You're wise that you stopped me from coming to blood, from spilling blood." But you see, David was prone to anger and he was about to get angry. ולא בא לידי קבלת לשון הרע שאמר ציווה על מפיבושת, okay, ציווה is the son of שאול, על מפיבושת, אלא מחמת כעסו עליו, הוא בא לידי התנהגות שלא עלתה בקנה אחד עם גודל צדקתו ונדיבתו, במה שלא קיבל את הצטדקותו, ואמר עליו, למה תדבר עוד דבריך? אמרתי אתה בציווה תחלקו את השדה. Okay? So basically, Mephibosheth didn't come. Avshalom and David are fighting, and Mephibosheth doesn't come to support David. So Siva says Mephibosheth didn't come. The son of Shaul says Mephibosheth didn't come because he is against you. And David accepted this. The real reason is Mephibosheth just couldn't come. He physically wasn't able to come. And as a result, he acted in a way which is not befitting for David HaMelech. And he didn't accept, when Mephibosheth tried to excuse himself, he didn't accept it. And David said, "Why? Don't speak anymore. You're going to have to now divide with Siva. I'm punishing you." ואמרו חז"ל בשעה שאמר דוד למפבושת אתה בציווה תחלקו את השדה יצא בת קול אמרה רחם בבם לכתוב המלכות. He was punished as a result of this. He didn't accept the excuse of Mephibosheth. But again, it's his anger which caused him to not to pay attention. Right? ועשה מלך יהודה עם כל גודל צדקתו והשגחת השם תעלה עליו. עשה the king of Yehuda, despite his righteousness, גרם לו הכעס לעז פניו אל נביאו, חנני. He got angry with the prophet Hanani, ובא לידי שפיכת דמים. Hanani was warning him about the Avodah Zarah, and he got angry with him, the king. כמו שנאמר, ויכעס עשה אל הרועה. He got angry with the prophet Hanani, ויתנהו בית המהפך, he put him in prison, כי בזעף עמו אל זאת, because he was angry. וירצץ עשה מן העם בית ההיא. So even Asa, despite him being a good king, he got angry. ויואש מלך יהודה, Yoash, the king of Yehuda, העבירהו הכעס על צדקתו וגודל נפשו עד שהרג את זכריה בן יהוידע הכהן. He got angry and he lost control, and he killed Zechariah, the son of יהוידע, כמו שנאמר, וירגמו אבן במצוות המלך בחצר בית אדוני. ולא זכר יואש המלך החסד אשר עשה יהוידע אביו עמו וההרוג את בנו כמותו, אמר ירא אדוני וידרוש. Right? So right? So Zechariah ben Yehoiada had been telling him off, and Yoash didn't care about that. And despite the fact that Yehoiada had been kind to Yoash, because of his anger, he killed Zechariah. ועוד בתנ"ך פסוקים רבים כאלה, מלבד מה שהזכרנו, ואם תתחכה אחריהם, מצות תמצאם. Look, there are many other stories in the Tanakh. וכבר באנו לך באחד מפרקי החלק של מצוין הזה, קצבת עוונו של המקלל, היא הכעס. People curse and swear because of anger. וכבר הפליג שלמה בגנות הכעס. I'll just finish here and then we'll stop. Shlomo Melech tell us about anger, b'shevach harichot apayim, and with the praise of being slow to anger. B'psukim harbe shizkanu lechem tzatam melech eskol titam. With many of the verses, there's many more verses. וגם חז"ל הרבו לידוש בגנות הכעס. Chazal told us also שאמרו הקורע בגדיו בחמתו ומפזר מעותיו בחמתו יבנך כבוד עבודה זרה. A person who tears his clothes in his anger and throws around things in his anger, he's like he's serving עבודה זרה. כך אמונתו של יצרה, היום אומר לך עשה כך וכך, ועושה למחר אומר לך עבודה זרה. Today he tells you get angry, the next day he tells you serve עבודה זרה. ועוד אמרו שם, and further חכמים said, מה דכתיב לא יהיה בך אל זר, you should not have a foreign god within you. זהו אל זר שיש בגופו של אדם, how can you have a foreign god within you and עבודה זרה within you? הווה אומר זה יצרה. This is יצרה, יצרה שתי מובנים, כללי מיוחד, there is a general implication and a specific one. מיוחד הוא קצרת כוח הרגש שנימה שיפוטה של השכל. The individual, the specific one is that force of emotion which has no intellect, where you lose control of yourself of anger. Okay, let's stop there. So what we've seen here is in this chapter, calmness. We've seen that training, we've discussed the final calmness is, many levels of it, but training for calmness is through habits, to remember the consequences of when we've been angry in the past. Anger and arrogance are related, calmness and humility are interrelated. And training for calmness comes through both ways. What we've seen tonight is one way thinking about the stories in the Torah. What we're going to do next time after Pesach is see more stories in the Torah where people were calm and the gain they got from that. And then to see the mitzvot in the Torah which are there to train patience, many interesting mitzvot to train patience. Then it'll tell us when calmness is not good. And it'll tell us what happens when you're in doubt. And finally, what's the concept of anger by God? So that will be the second part of the chapter will take us a full shiur b'ezrat Hashem next time after Pesach. So that concludes tonight's shiur.